Everybody, welcome to the first of our 5 lectures covering the what to do after you've made a game jam series. I'm Jay Powell. I'm the CEO of the Powell Group, and I'm also the founder of Indie Game Business, who has partnered up with Global Game Jam for this entire series. So, to start with, we're going to go with the very basics. Why you need to understand the business of games. And we cover this because there are simply very few resources out there in the real world to understand this part of game development. Um, so we're going to dive right in. If you've got questions, put them in chat. I'm going to ignore them for about 45 minutes. And then once we get to the end, we'll go through any questions that you all have. So why do you need to understand the business of games? Because bluntly, if you want to make this your full-time job or your career, then you're going to have to be able to earn a decent living doing it. If you're only doing games for hobbies, for art, or just jams for the fun of it, you don't have to listen to me. That's fine. It's okay. I understand. But if you want to turn this into something that you get to do every single day for the rest of your life because it's fun and you enjoy it, these are things that you need to understand that we're going to go through today. So a little bit about me. I've been on the business end of games for 25 years now. I started out as an agent. I did some of the very first deals for Dice, Starbreeze, Paradox, Heimamont Games, many others. Did that for a little while. We transitioned that company into a publisher. After that, I started a production company. We ran for about 3 years. And then 14 years ago, I founded the Powell Group. So I've basically seen the business side of games from the developer standpoint, the publisher standpoint, as a consultant. On the licensing side, virtually every seat around the table I've been in at some point in time. The consulting firm works for everybody from indie devs all the way up to billion-dollar Fortune 500 companies. We specialize in basically making partnerships. We help indie devs get their game to market with a publisher or with investors. We help publishers and investors find those games. We do audits on it, a lot of boring business consulting stuff. But the bottom line is we understand the business part of this. And then 5 years ago, I started Indie Game Business, which is our education initiative, essentially. We do free talks like this. We have our 15th digital conference coming up in a couple of weeks. A lot of stuff to basically just educate developers and give them the same resources and access to publishers and investors that the big companies have, especially when a lot of folks just simply can't afford to go to things like GDC and Gamescom. So that's all of my background I'll bore you with for right now. Now, why does working on business development in the industry matter? Mainly because these deals don't happen instantly. We have seen the average time it takes from the time a developer sends a game to a publisher to the time a contract's signed stretch from 4 months to now sometimes it's 6 months, depending on the publisher. It takes a long time. You can't just sit down and go, okay, we're going to run out of money next month. We need to figure out what we're going to do. You have to be doing this ongoing. You have to be building relationships. Our industry is one of the absolute perfect examples of it's not what you know, it's who you know. So much of this industry happens based on relationships. It's a large industry in terms of revenue, but it's a very small industry in terms of, everybody tends to know everybody else. And if they don't, they can typically find out if you're legit or good to work with or a decent human being within 2 or 3 emails or phone calls. So you constantly have to be talking to folks, reiterating what you do, building relationships, even if there's no work to be done at that given time. The third one, you have to be able to spin and pivot very, very quickly. When you're looking at games that can take anywhere from 12 to 24 to 36 months, to create, the industry is going to do a lot of transition during that time. We see it ongoing, from just the pandemic until now. Metroidvanias, puzzle games used to be much more popular than they are now. Now, a lot of publishers won't even look at them because there's so many of them on the market and they're not doing well. So as a studio, you need to be able to understand what's going on out in the market and then be able to pivot and tweak your game to be relevant, basically. So When it comes to doing all this business development, what's involved? So we're going to cover all of these today in some way, shape, or form. First one is marketing, messaging, and the PR side of things. Prospecting, which is going out and finding clients to work with or publishers to pitch your game to. Proposals, writing these proposals, especially if it's an RFP that's coming in, a request for proposal from a bigger company where they might want you to make something, custom. But then also that comes down to crafting a pitch deck. All of that goes under the proposal section. A little bit of contract negotiation. Obviously, you want to make sure that when you get that situation set up, you're not going to be, leaving yourself in a very vulnerable position. So there's a contract negotiation aspect of it. Project and team management. You should always have a producer as well, if at all possible, or at least someone, managing the production side of the game. But you, as the business developer, as the CEO, as whoever's going to be out there doing the work, finding new deals or finding publishers, you need to at least have an understanding on it and, keep your finger on the pulse, so to speak. Getting paid, that's a big one. It doesn't do us any good if we're going out and trying to make a living doing something and we're not getting paid for doing it. And then endorsements at the end of the day. And we'll talk about this as well. It's like once you do a good job on a project or you have a successful partnership with a publisher, getting everybody else to understand that is one of the big key things. So first and foremost, marketing, messaging, and PR. So you want to take the time to establish yourself as an expert. That's the whole point of a lot of that relationship building. Why you see a lot of people doing work on LinkedIn and post on there as well. TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and everywhere else is important, more so for the consumer side than it is from the business to business side, but it's out there. How can you do this? So, writing industry related, blog post, basically, talking about what you're doing, what impact you're seeing, your reaction to trends in the market. You don't have to be a 10, 15, 20-year-old veteran to be doing this and people listen to you. There's a lot of developers out there that are in the same, state that you're in. They're just getting started or they've only launched 1 or 2 games. They're going to listen to you as well, because having your voice, having that expertise of what you're going through, somebody else is going to be going through it as well. That's one thing that I've learned in life is no matter what you're going through, somebody else has gone through it as well. And if you can speak to those people or communicate with those people and relate with those people, that's going to go a long way to building those relationships that you're looking for. Blogs, being on podcasts, starting a podcast. We started the Indie Game Business one 4 or 5 years ago at this point. Yeah, it's 5 years ago. It started as just a Twitch channel. And then we transitioned it into a podcast. And now we sit down every Friday and talk to someone in the industry about some sort of business related something. It takes time. You're not going to start it and it's going to be instantly, huge. I mean, ours relatively still isn't huge, but we have thousands of people that listen, every week. Getting out there, being consistent, sharing what you know, putting your thoughts out there. As long as you're consistent and you're relatable and you're, truthful about everything, at least in your mind, then, you can build that reputation as well. Speaking, this one is one that can come down to what kind of budget you have. You should always be applying to speak at conferences. The reality is a lot of those conferences don't necessarily compensate for you. So they may accept you as a speaker and give you a free pass, but if you have to fly halfway around the world to get there, then you're back in that situation of, is this worth, the investment to get there? Other conferences will absolutely take care of your flight, your hotel, the whole shebang. That's the best case scenario, frankly. Our conference that we do, it's all online, so none of our speakers have to travel, but we still pay them. I mean, it's one of the things that I'm very adamant about with all of our conferences. I feel if someone is taking their time out of their day to share what they know and to share their experience, they need to be compensated. And so obviously lean towards the ones that are going to pay you or cover your cost to go there, but you should always be speaking, and because that is going to raise your visibility and your reputation as well. And people are going to, it adds, credence to what you're saying, that someone at this conference selected you to be a speaker. Social media is one of those that, we look at it as easy. Oh, yeah, all you have to do is post sometimes. I have very little time to post myself. And then the time I'm like, oh, yeah, look, I'm building a Lego. There we go. It's a matter of, again, being consistent. And there's different tools that you can use to manage this. So you sit down on a Sunday afternoon and you write out an entire week's, worth of posts, and you just automate them to go out, or you can work with AI to get this stuff done. But getting your voice out there on social media is a big one. And then the last one's newsletters. A lot of people still discount the value of newsletters, but they are quite valuable. Our newsletter now goes to around 11,000 people every week. It started out as none, but it's built over time because we're putting out something that is valuable, that is insightful, that people can relate to, that's informative. And it's that sort of messaging that you need to build the traction to, increase that visibility, and people will start going, oh yeah, I'll get your newsletter. I read your articles. It's that sort of stuff that are going to help you build these relationships that are going to lead to new business, that are going to lead to publishing deals. And at the same time, just simply raise your visibility in the industry in general. Still working on my coffee this morning. All right. Next, prospecting, because it doesn't do you any good to, be visible and everything if you can't find people that need your work or that want to publish your game. This is basically just simply the exercise of finding people to work with. And it's grunt work, as I list down below. A lot of times, I find myself doing it. We had friends the other week that were over, and, I laughed and I said, look, all the kids want to work in the game industry because it's, fun and you get to make games all day. And I spun my laptop around and there was a big spreadsheet of people who are going to be at DICE. And I'm like, this is my world though. This is what I do. Research, connecting with people, introducing myself, all that sort of good stuff. Now, where can you get all of this data? Industry grads are great, especially if you are at a bigger conference like GDC or Gamescom. Find the area of the floor that's dedicated to the trade delegations from different countries, and they will always have little pamphlets or a QR code that you can scan that list, here are the companies that work in Colombia, here are the ones that work in Spain. The end all be all is the German one, because they have a book that's about this thick that they give out at all the conferences, and it lists every game related company in Germany with their, decision makers and email addresses and all of this sort of stuff listed. What you want to do is get a CRM, a customer relationship management software. We use Nutshell internally, but there's a dozen of them. If you go out and look at, just Google small business CRM, and you want to be putting, this information in there as you go along. So you can get it from industry guides. You can get it from newsletters, sign up for other newsletters in the industry. Follow the web, follow the news. That's the first thing I do in the mornings when I sit down in my office, is go through, what's the news to see, through all the major industry sites. Then if you take and you share some of that to your social media, there you've got some social media traction going as well. Mailing list, I'm on a couple of mailing lists in the industry, very much like newsletters. You're going to get aggregated comments and reports from folks. That's another good way to get out there. Then the grunt work side that I get to do sometimes, and that's just simply going through and researching these companies and then manually putting them into your CRM, or building a spreadsheet and then importing them. This type of work, if you're working from some sort of guide, is typically easier. It may be better for you to just get somebody on Fiverr to help you, or get somebody to come in as an intern to do this sort of stuff, because it is mind-numbingly boring, but it has to be done. And the more you do it, and the more you keep that database of yours up to date, the easier it's going to be to find a lot of this stuff. And then, personal assistants, the same thing, whether they're online, whether they're interns, whatever, get them to help you out for a second, for a little while, put it in there. And then it's just a matter of reaching out and following up with these people and introducing yourself. Which brings us to proposals, the blah, blah words and numbers section of business development. I gave this lecture at a conference locally, and my son and wife had a chance to come see me do my real job. And this was his favorite slide because now when people ask what his dad does, he just goes blah, blah, blah words and numbers. That's what a proposal is. So, how to write a good one? And this comes, this can be boiled into a pitch deck as well as a proposal that you're responding to get contract work. First off, show you understand the problem. That may be this company needs help doing XYZ because here's the challenge in the industry, but you want to make it abundantly clear that you understand what the problem is. In a pitch deck, that's going to be in the lines of, the problem is there's a gap in the market for this type of game that we've created, and here's how we know that. That's how we go in. Then you go into how are you going to solve it? Is that going to be through, your team is more experienced than other people in the industry? You have a better plan for it. Maybe you're cheaper. Pitch deck, here's the game, here's the demo type thing. Then go into what you're going to deliver, because this is going to be key. Is it going to be, if it's for a contract, obviously you're going to deliver the game, but outline that. Go beyond that, RFP and say, look, here are the features, here's the platforms it's going to be on. This is how we're going to go above and beyond what you're asking, to deliver it. If you're asking to do, we get asked to do audits on projects. So we go through and we say, look, this is what we're going to deliver. We're going to put together, the marketing personas you need to be targeting. This is the sort of gameplay that you need to be looking at. Here's what's hot in the market in terms of genres. A lot of that sort of stuff, just outline. This makes your life easier in the end anyway, because you get to basically build off of this when you're actually doing the work. You're already created the outline of what you're going to do. Go into what you will charge, obviously. And when you do this, one of the biggest mistakes that we see, new studios making is they try to make it as low budget as possible because that's how they think they're going to win. On one level, you're not wrong. But if you go into every proposal like that, you're going to end up hurting yourself in the long run because you're not going to have enough money to pay your people. You're going to be stressed out the entire time. If there's any sort of problem or, the project needs to be extended, you don't have the budget for it. Always, always, always make sure you're paying yourself a livable wage and you've got some cushion built in there for the things that will inevitably go wrong. But be very clear on what you're going to charge, what the milestones are, when you expect to be paid, all of that lovely stuff. Tell them why you're awesome. This is the part where you go in and say, we're going to do a better job than everybody else because of XYZ. If you're brand new, that's fine. Your advantage is probably going to be cost. But go through and tell them, at some point in your proposal, why you are the best source for getting this done and why your team is going to do it better than everybody else. Then once you have all of this done, save it and use it as a template, because with any amount of luck, you're going to be doing this a lot and you do not want to have to sit down and rewrite all of this stuff every single time, it comes up and it needs to be done. So save it as a template. That way, when the next proposal comes in or when the next project comes up, you've got something to work with automatically. You don't have to rewrite it from scratch, and you're going to save yourself a lot of time in the long run. Project management. Producers, in my opinion, are some of the most underrated and underappreciated people in the industry, right behind community managers. God bless community managers. I don't have the patience for people to do that. And so they are always number one on my list. Producers and project managers are number two. I always get upset when people are like, oh, you're a producer, you're not a game developer. No, they are. They're the ones making sure that this is going to be actually done on time. And so if you don't have someone on your team who is a dedicated producer, you need to make sure that someone is handling the project management, side of this project. Otherwise, it's going to go off track. It's going to stretch way long. There's going to be issues. If you're the person doing the business development, being, either you're the founder or you're just the one with the most experience or whatever, you don't necessarily need to be the producer. You can be, But if you're not, you just need to be able to make sure that you've got a good idea of what's going on. So, first off, is having the right people do the right job. Um, from our side, when I'm hiring, because we've grown from myself and one other person many years ago up to a team of 10 now, it's you can get into that whole, do we hire for experience or do we hire for culture? There's no right answer. It's somewhere in the middle. The way I typically look at it is, we'll have a position, we'll post it, we'll get, resumes in, and then I sit down with those candidates and go, what do you want to do? I know you will do this job because you applied for it, but what do you want to do? And the closer you can pair people with what they want to do in the industry with what you need done, the better off you're going to be in the long run. And that may mean that people's jobs, shift roles throughout the course of their career or their tenure at the company. But that's a good way of keeping people happy. And if people are enjoying what they do, they're going to be better at it. So always try to do your best to have the right people doing the right job. I've got friends of mine who run companies. They hire a community manager. They find that community manager was really, really good at, selling services. Now that person's the biz dev person at at this company, and they do a fantastic job. It's that sort of stuff that you'll see with people, and you make sure that they're always doing what they enjoy and doing the thing that's going to benefit you the most as a company. Understand at a glance what's going on. This ties very closely into that, preemptive strikes on future problems. You're not going to be expected to be able to identify every problem early on with your first couple of projects that you do. When you've done this a few times, you can start seeing problems develop before they even develop, just based on experience. But you, as the person who's handling the biz dev side of this, needs to be able to see, even just like on a once a week basis, okay, is this milestone going to slip? Are we having issues with this piece of tech? What are some of the problems, and identifying those roadblocks down the way? What are these things coming up and how can I deal with them? So if you have a good, understanding at a glance, not like diving deep into it, you don't need to be in the morning stand-ups, but understanding at a glance what's going on, that's going to help you create these preemptive strikes on future problems, because you can sit down a month out and go, okay, if this is a problem now, if it's a minor problem now, it's going to turn into a major problem 2 months down the road, and we need to do something about it perfectly. During my time as an agent, and even on the consulting side, there's nothing that frustrates me more than to hear that everything is going fine on a project when we've set a client up with, a publisher or whatever. And then 3 months down the line, I get an email or a phone call with both sides are just like enormously angry with each other because this is such a absolute batch of chaos that's going on. And then they turn to me and go, well, you need to fix it. And I'm like, well, I don't even know what's going on. You haven't kept me posted on any of this. And now we're at a point where, everything's going to get terminated, and you're looking me to have a, magic solution for this. You need to make sure that you're always getting a good idea on what may be going wrong, the little things that might turn into bigger things along the way, because it's going to save you a whole lot of heartache in the end. Making sure nothing falls through the cracks. Yes. So this is one lesson that I learned many, many, many years ago. We were working as a publishing company, and we were actually porting a game for another company. And, I go and I submit, we hired a production person to keep all this stuff off of my desk. And all I was getting the whole time was everything's fine, everything's fine. We submit the final candidate, I send them the invoice, and I get a phone call from the other publisher and going, this isn't final, there's no multiplayer in it. And I'm like, what do you mean there's no multiplayer in it? And I turned around and looked at the producer and I went, where's the multiplayer aspect of this game? And he's like, well, the developer said it was going to be hard about 6 months ago, so we just struck it. But he didn't tell anybody. Those are the types of things that you have to make sure you kind of tell people about. And so, whether it's something that drastic or whether it's something like you sent your game to a publisher, but you forgot to follow up with them, which you should always be doing. We'll cover that on Friday. that's the type of stuff that you just build, build systems to make sure it doesn't fall through the crack. I've got ADHD. I've been doing this for a long time. I have multiple redundant systems behind me, everything from our CRM to emails to my notebooks, and sometimes even like little post-it notes laying around so I don't forget this stuff because I am so paranoid about it. But just simply not following up with someone or not diving into that extra level of, is this really going okay? Those are the types of small things that can fall through the cracks, and you just don't know anything else about it until it's too late for everybody. The last one is, get the job done like you said you would. And that's why that particular project to me was so hard, because I had to sit down and call that publisher and go, I know I promised you, this game with these features, but bluntly, it's not going to happen. And, that's our fault. As long as you get that job done like you said you would, you're going to be ahead of about 80-90% of the people that are going out there and trying to get that work. It's a very, very competitive industry, and all you need is one publisher or one partner that says, look, we paid them, they didn't do what they said they were going to do, and it's going to absolutely cripple you for years, because there's so many options that a lot of these companies can choose from that they're just going to skip right over you. They're like, well, there might have been a problem there. Let's not even deal with them. So always make sure that you're getting the job done like you said you would, because like a slide says, no one comes back for crappy service. Now, getting paid. Kind of important. When you're setting up your contracts, this is where we get into a bit of the negotiation side. You always want to make sure that all of your payments are tied to specific milestones. And one of the big things and one of the big hurdles that a lot of companies run into is they don't plan for approvals. When you're doing any sort of game that's in production, and even more so if you're using any sort of licensed IP, you have to make sure that the approval process in that contract is clearly defined and everybody understands it. What do we mean by approval process? On the simple level, you send a publisher a milestone. It's the milestone description says it should cover the following bullet points. Either it does or it doesn't. If it does, they approve it in writing and you send them an invoice. If not, they're going to give you very specific, reasons why, and you're going to have to fix it and then submit it again. That process gets even longer when you're dealing with a license or an IP, and they'll have to go through and look at it to make sure that it approves. It, goes along with all of their standard guidelines and all of their rules and regulations on how you use their property. You need to start focusing in. When you're dealing with a publisher, you can easily be looking at a month. When you're dealing with an IP, you can easily be looking at 2 months. But laying all of this out in the contract is extremely important, because what can happen, let's say you have monthly milestones. You send the milestone to the publisher. You're expecting that money to come in no later than like 30 days after you submit the milestone. Preferably it's going to be shorter. But if they don't approve it, so let's say they have 2 weeks to approve your milestone. 2 weeks goes by, you get a note that says it's not approved. Here's why. And then you have 2 weeks to fix it. So already you're out a month. And then if it has to continue going back and forth, say once it finally gets approved, what if their agreement says that they have 30 days to send the payment? Now you're 2 months out from getting paid. At the same time, you still got to be paying all the people on your staff. So you have to be very, very clear on milestone payments or any sort of payment threshold in the contract, that it's specifically tied to bullet points, to dates, and there's a very, very, very clear approval method that goes into it. Second one, give the client the info they need to pay you. You would be shocked how often this comes up. You send an invoice to a client, to a publisher, to whoever, and you don't put your bank information on it. Some of these companies only pay bills like once a week. It's not like you're going to send it and they're instantly going to go over to their bank and send you money. If they come up, to Thursday, or, God forbid, they only do it twice a month, and it's like they look at your invoice, but they're like, we have no way of they didn't put their bank information on there, we don't even know how to pay them, then they're going to kick it back and you're going to be looking at another week or another 2 or 3 weeks before you get paid anyway. So always make sure, either as a separate document that you're sending over that says, here's our banking information, or even better, put your banking information on the invoice. And that way they cannot deny that they don't have it at all, because they're looking at the invoice. There's your bank information at the bottom of the page. Very, very important. A lot of people tend to forget that. The next one's forecasting your revenue. You don't have to be a CPA or a bookkeeper to do this. I do it with my company, and God knows I hate math. So the simplest way, probably the way that I do it, I've got a spreadsheet that covers all the incoming revenue and all of, the payments, staff, payroll, all the stuff that I have to pay at the bottom. And it's not exact, there's not down to the penny. I'm not the bookkeeper, but I can look at a quick glance and go, okay, March is coming up and we don't have any revenue coming in March, but I still have to pay salaries and all this other stuff. What are we going to do? Always forecast what you've got coming in so you can understand, do you have budget left to go to a conference? Do you have, something for bonuses or whatever it may be, new piece of technology, new computer system, whatever. Always make sure at some level you're forecasting your revenue so you can at least look out 3 or 4 months and go, okay, we have a problem because we don't have anything coming in, in the short term. You can do it the full accounting way. I just use a spreadsheet. Track your payment status. Most invoicing software is going to help you do this. But in the event that you don't, always make sure that, because it's very easy if you get in the middle of something and you've got multiple clients coming in, to turn around and go, oh crap, we invoiced so-and-so 2 months ago and they haven't paid us. Always understand and mark off and track who's paid you and who hasn't, and stay on the people that aren't paying, because it is very much a situation where that squeaky wheel gets the oil every single time. If you're the one consistently and to the best that the situation requires, politely poking and pushing, saying, hey, when are we going to get paid? You'll get paid first. It's the people that aren't asking are the ones that, if there is a problem with that company, the people that aren't asking for the money are the ones that aren't going to get paid, because that company is like looking at, oh my God, what can we absolutely pay and what can we absolutely put off? So make sure you understand who's paid your bills and who hasn't. And then for the ones that haven't, just kind of politely every week, hey, is there a update on this payment type thing? That's the way you're going to ensure that you're as far up the top of your list as you can get. Understanding your expenses, that goes right along with forecasting all that revenue. Have a good idea of how much you're spending every month on salary, tech, rent, whatever it may be, so you can understand how much extra money and how much cushion you've got built into it. And then finally, pay your contractors or your employees, or whoever it is. There's nothing that will absolutely sink a company's reputation faster than not paying your people, because they're going to be upset. They're not going to work as well for you. And the internet, they're going to tell everybody that they're not getting paid. And that's going to create problems down the road for you. Publishers aren't going to want to work with you. If you're doing contract work, those contractors aren't going to work with you, because they're like, well, we can pay them, but if they don't pay their team and their team's unhappy, then the work's not going to get done. So above and beyond everything else, make sure your team is getting paid. All right. Almost out of coffee. So endorsements. And this is one of the ones that people tend to have more trouble doing than not. And yeah, I know it's weird and it can be difficult, but you need to do it. At the end of that project, did you do what you said you were going to do? Now, you're not going to get to the end of a project where there wasn't some sort of problem or hiccup or disagreement. That's just life. That's just the way it is. The problem, the goal is to do it with as little of that as possible, or at least being able to come up with, solutions that everybody's happy with. Did the client see value in what you did? That's another good one. This is where a lot of times you have to, show your work, so to speak. Had a woman that worked for us several years ago, and she would send a email to the contact of her client at the end of the week. This is what we did. And at first I was like, okay, that's just a little annoying. But then I began to see the beauty in what she was doing. it was reminding that client every week that, you may not be seeing the, benefits of what we're doing right now, but we're going to remind you that we're actually doing stuff, this entire time. And so sometimes you're going to have to do that. You're going to have to sit down at the end of a project and say, hey, look, this was what we told you we would do. This is how it was done. It was on time, or it was a little overtime, or on budget, or maybe not. But we encountered these sorts of problems, and here's the solutions that we had. And at the end of the day, we're happy with it. That's what you want to do, because a lot of people have short memories. It's like if the last couple of milestones or points in the contract were a little bumpy, they may not forget all the good stuff that was gone early on. So it's always good to kind of like keep notes and show your work when you're doing this. But you want to go and you want to ask these companies for an endorsement, just for a little quote that says, hey, Jay and his team were fantastic to work with. They, accomplished everything that we needed them to do, that sort of stuff. A lot of people, I mean, hell, myself included, sometimes it's like you feel weird going and you asking for this, but you have to say, okay, what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is they're going to say, no, I'm not going to do that. Okay, whatever. Go on to the next one. Don't lose sleep over it. But you need to go and do it, because it's going to allow you to build that reputation. And when you put it in your next pitch deck or your next proposal, like, hey, we worked with this company and they really liked what we did, and here's what they said about us. That's going to raise your visibility, raise your reputation, and help you get that next title. Because if it comes down, the next project that you pitch for, you and another company are, neck and neck in this, but, you've got quotes from people that other people may know in there that's saying you're fantastic, you're going to get that deal. So always go and say, hey, we did a good job. We feel like we did anyway. Can you give us an endorsement? Once you have it, get it out there. Some companies maybe, the bigger the company, the more like little red tape they're going to have to go through to be able to do it, but they'll generally do it. I don't think I've ever had a company that we've worked with in 25 years say, no, we're not allowed to do that. It's a matter of, getting it from them, taking the time that they need, and then making sure that it's referenced. Sometimes they may not want you to put it just like a social media post, but it's generally fine to put it in your pitch decks and your, proposals and all that sort of stuff. But get it out there. Let people know that, hey, we just finished this project and we did it with this company and they really liked it. And then ask for referrals. That's the easiest way to get business. I mean, the Powell Group's been around 14 years. We've never done marketing or advertising aside from what we do with the indie game business stuff. All of our clients come in from referrals, and it's, so-and-so, I was talking to this person and they said, you were a great company to help us solve this problem, that sort of stuff. Ask for who else you may be able to help along the way. And that's going to lead you to more business, which is a stable business, which allows you to grow and plan and do all of those wonderful things. At the end of the day, it is perfectly okay to brag about what you've done. No one else is going to do it. You're going to have to do it. So be out there, be loud, be proud, say, hey, look, we did this and it was fantastic. And that's going to build up over time and, get you more work coming in. And that's it. So if you've got questions, there's our website for the Powell Group consulting firm. That's in the midst of being updated. We'll have a new site shortly. But all the stuff that you need to know as indie devs, all of that can be found on indiegamebusiness.com. Looks like I need to know all these still work. We've got a publisher list that lists 1,400 publishers and investors in the industry. It's a great starting point if you want to get your project out there in front of other companies. We've got a Discord, obviously all these podcasts, all the links, you can find them on indiegame.business or indiegamebusiness.com. And that's all I've got. Do we have questions? We do. Okay. All right. Charlie, do you want to put these up on the screen? Or I can do it. Yeah, we go. So how do you screen for an effective producer versus someone who decided you're a producer just now? Oh, Lexi, that is a good question, because that's exactly what happened in that situation that I brought up. We didn't screen well enough for a good producer. Some of the best, if they don't have a track record of producing, And even if they do, you need to check your references to make sure that they actually did what they said they were going to do. I will go to my grave arguing some of the best producers that I've seen in the industry came out of QA. And now, obviously, if they were good at QA, because they have a skill set that, revolves around identifying problems and communicating them effectively to other people. Time management skills are another one, but it's a matter of understanding in many ways, I'll always say, like, the organization patterns of that person. If you've worked with them, if you're promoting from within type thing, that's the easiest way. But get a sense of what they've done in the past. And if they haven't been a producer, then at least make sure that they're coming from a producer adjacent, type work. If they've been more on the creative side, a lot of times you see producers getting laid off at publishers and becoming biz dev people. I've always found, this is 100% me, I've always found that the best producers that I've ever seen and promoted and have grown have actually come out of our QA department. So it's about understanding that they have the skills necessary to do the producer job, more so than, or I mean, if they have not been a successful producer before. I've produced titles. I have executive produced producers who have produced titles. I have a track record of doing it. I don't ever want to do it again. That was like 15 years ago. I hated it. Not something I want to do. So I'm a case of, yes, I have been a producer. I don't want to do it again. That's a whole different ballgame. But if they haven't done it successfully, look for that same skill set that ties along with it. All right. How do you negotiate for more time if needed before publishing? I'm assuming you're talking about, if a project has gone over schedule, over budget. One, you always want to plan for it before you actually get to the negotiation stage. The safe number is to take, that production timeline that you've got and then add like 30% onto it, because that's about how often it's going to be wrong. It's hard to negotiate for more time. The best thing to do is keep everybody up to date. The producer on your side, or whoever your contact is at the publisher, keep them posted on everything. And if they're a good publisher, they're going to see this coming too. So it's not a situation where you can just go, oh, I think this is going to slip, but we're not going to tell them because maybe it'll be okay. A good producer, the publisher, is going to know this is slipping as well. So just communication is key on it. Make sure that they know going in, and then you can negotiate. You can just tell them, it's like, look, it's going to take us another 2 weeks to get this done. Or maybe we need to switch some things around in the deliverable. So this part of milestone 7 is delivered in milestone 6, while this part of 6 is going to get moved to 8. The best thing you can do is just plan for it ahead of time, and then keep everybody on the same page with the good communication along the way. So what CRM platform would you recommend for starting companies? One, Google it to start with. But off the top of my head, Nutshell is the one that we use. I'm not going to tell you it's got some gigantic best feature that all the other ones don't have. It's simply the one we started using 14 years ago, and it's the one we still use. Sugar CRM is a good one. The HubSpot has a CRM. So if you're already using their social media or marketing tools, it kind of blends right into it. Do not get Salesforce. That's the one thing I will tell all indie devs. It is built for gigantic companies. It works well for gigantic companies. For indie devs, it's like trying to kill a fly with a sledgehammer. It's just complete and utter overkill. However, if your biz dev person actually has experience with Salesforce and you don't want to pay the Salesforce price for it, Zoho CRM is virtually identical and it's almost free. I'm sure there are other ones that have come up in the meantime. Someone last week mentioned a open source CRM that I had never heard of, but Google it up. Just Google small business CRMs. You want to make sure that it's going to hold at least 1,000 contacts in it on the free plan. Remember, everybody on your team does not need access to it. You don't need to be buying extra seats for the artists and the designers. They're not doing any of the business development stuff. So generally, you can get away with a free version because you're only going to have one seat. But make sure it's got room for 1,000 people, 1,000 contacts. Sounds like a lot, but you'll go through it pretty quick. A tagging system is, useful. We'll actually go into much more detail on this on Friday on the how to find a publisher one. But nutshell, HubSpot, Sugar CRM, Zoho, and then several others you can probably just like Google up. How do you handle it when a client project that didn't go well? Professionally, while screaming into a pillow. Always be upfront. I mean, if it's a situation where the project never came to light, no one's ever going to know about it, you don't have to mention it, but you always need to be ready to talk about it. Do not blame it totally on the publisher, even if it was totally their fault. You want to make sure, you just be like a doctor, outline it clinically. This is what happened. This is how we fixed it. This is why something went wrong. If you come across as that person who is constantly blaming, or even once, I'm not even going to say constantly, blame everything on the other party, even if that was the case, you're going to come across as basically untrustworthy. So this is where keeping good notes through everything, making sure everything's in email form, even if somebody agrees to a milestone, for example, over the phone, make sure you follow up with them and on email and say, just to confirm, you are confirming that this milestone is done. Paper trails are always important. But you just have to be upfront with it. Just the same way that I sit down and say, hey, look, we had a project one time that, I was in charge of, had a producer that wasn't doing what they were supposed to be doing, but I didn't stay on them as much as I was supposed to. And, it caused a problem. As long as you're upfront about it, you don't try to hide it, you don't try to make a ton of excuses, and you outline exactly what happened, that's the easiest way to deal with it. I will take that company over the one that tells me that they've never had any problems ever with a client every day, because I don't believe if you've been doing this more than 5 or 10 years that you've never had a problem with a client. That's just part of the system. All right, I'm somewhat worried about putting my game out in public before release because of IP paranoia. Do you have any advice for me moving forward on marketing and trying to get sales? I'm going to assume by IP paranoia, you're talking about gameplay. And if so, there's nothing you can do about that anyway. You can't trademark that. If it is legitimate IP, the character designs, the title, the logo, all that sort of stuff, there are steps you can take to get that stuff trademarked and get it in the process. But keep in mind, you can't trademark, you can't copyright gameplay. Power World, perfect example of that right now. That game has obvious influences from Pokemon, Ark, and Breath of the Wild off the top of my head. Still a brilliant game. I love it. But you have to get it out there. And actually, by getting it out there, that could even help you down the road. Because one of the things when it comes down to copyright trademark infringement is who was doing it first. If you are established as doing it first, and it is something that is, can be copyrighted or trademarked, that's going to help you down the line. But you can't assume that you're the only one that's doing this. The probability in this day and age with the volume of games that are being released that you have something truly unique that no one else is working on is next to nil. So getting it out there, getting people excited about your version of it, what you're doing, is actually the best thing that you can do. You can't, obviously, if someone had been overly paranoid about Power World on Nintendo's legal team years ago, they would have done something about it. You just can't. You have to make the best game that you can, the most intriguing, the most the one people wanted to play the most, and not worry about everybody else. If it is something that is legally trademarked, copyrighted, go ahead and get a lawyer, start that process, but don't stress on it too much. Get out there, show the world you're making it, show everybody how awesome it is, and you'll actually be helping yourself in the long run. All right, last one. How do you develop a network of publishers that you can approach and follow up? Is live events and in-person meetings really the only way? No, it's not. It's really, really not. One, go download our little guide. The folks at Global Game Jam have access to it too. They can send it out if they're just being sent out. But either way, all you have to do is go to our website, download it. There's, conferences like our own that's coming up in 2 weeks. It's not in person at all. It's all of our conferences are completely remote. So, start reaching out, emails, social media. A lot of scouts and publishers are actually very active on social media, more so than they are on their own emails. So reaching out, saying, hey, look, this is what we're working on, through Discord. There's a lot of ways. I mean, we have built indie game business in a sense of giving developers like you the same opportunities that everybody else has without having to go to these live events. So no, by all means, that's not your only option. Just make sure you want to make sure that you have a LinkedIn profile, that your company has a LinkedIn profile, because that's like one of the first things that a lot of the business people are going to do is go check and see if you're legitimate. And, that's where they're going to go check. But no, reach out to them, social media, email them, go to conferences that are online only. Reach out that way. There's a lot of options for you. You don't necessarily have to go to, all the big conferences. In fact, I've told many people over the last couple of weeks, if your strategy for getting a publisher is to start scheduling meetings out of the blue at GDC, it's exactly one of the worst ways, I would say, to get a publisher, because one, everybody's so busy that week. It's like, I'll be there 5 days. There's years I've had over 100 meetings. And so they're going to have meetings every half hour. You're not going to really get a chance to build any sort of rapport with them, any sort of, relationship. And you got 20 minutes to pitch your thing and be gone. And the reality is, unless they're taking like copious notes, there's a chance they're not even going to remember your game at the end of it, because they've seen so many of them. So the more, smaller regional low-key events that you can go to, those are actually better for building those relationships, because everybody's at the conference hall. It's not that big. You're going to see each other in passing, wave and say smile. And then in the evening, they're all going to go to, networking parties and all this sort of stuff in one area. And so you get to actually see that person that you're meeting with more than for like 20 minutes while you're both rushing to get to other stuff. So no, it's not your only option. There's plenty of other stuff out there. And I highly recommend you do things outside of live events. Okay, hold on one second. What's the painkiller? Oh, I did the deal for that game many years ago. What is the best way to approach investors for the first time to start an indie studio? One, that link, and Inspector Geek said the publisher link doesn't seem to be working. Let me make sure that you all have the right one real quick, because we do have a new website. And so it might very well be a different thing than we gave y'all weeks ago. So all right, I just sent the link over to Charlie, so we should be able to get that soon. All right, best way to approach investors: start with that list, or a list, any list that you can find, but ours has got a lot of them on there. And then reach out with a pitch deck, and we're going to talk. We've got, I think, another talk this week on how to build a pitch deck, and then we'll cover it on my talk on Friday as well. But either reaching out with that pitch deck about your studio, or if there's like a contact form on their website, using that. It is rather cold to start with, to be blunt, but putting together a good intro email and pitch deck is the easiest way to do it, to get started. All right. I think that's it for now. I appreciate all y'all. I mean, this is awesome. If you've got questions, my email is just simply jay@powellgroupconsulting.com, or you can join our Discord, which is discord.gg/indiegamebusiness. Tons and tons of 7,000 other people from the industry in there, everybody from developers all the way up to publishers and investors. Feel free to ask questions there. It's a very friendly environment, very much there are no dumb questions type place. So don't be embarrassed, no matter how new you are to all of this. And yeah, with that, thanks you all for coming. And then pay attention for the rest of the week, because we've got 4 more of these lined up to teach you a little bit more about what to do next. Thanks, everyone.